Right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, members of council, our staff, and those that are joining us in the gallery and those that are participating online. We have council agenda for today for May 13th. If I can have a motion, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council will adopt the May 13, 2024 regular council meeting agenda as presented.
Thank you. Administration, anything to add?
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing to add.
Okay. Call question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Right, moving on to the agenda, it is number 3, which is a public input session. Administration, has anybody registered to speak?
Your Worship, no one has registered.
Okay, thank you. Anybody in the gallery would like to speak to council on anything that's not on the current agenda, please? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to number 4, which is presentations and delegations. We have nothing scheduled for tonight. So moving on to number 5, which is statutory public hearings. And we have nothing scheduled tonight as well. So number 6 on the agenda is the regular council meeting for April 22nd. Councillor Laurie, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that Town Council approve the April 22nd, 2024 regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. Members of council, you had opportunity to read up any errors or omissions on those minutes. Didn't see any either, so I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, moving on to number 7, which is council boards and committee minutes. What do we have here? Councillor Loynes.
Town Council received the council board and committee minutes as information.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Loynes. Members of council, we have 3 sets. 7.1, which is the TLC for February 7th and March 14th. 7.2 is the Marina Housing Foundation from March 6th. And 7.3 is the Stony Plain Public Library for March 20th. You had the opportunity to read those minutes. Any questions for clarity and understanding to the board member representatives? Councillor Laurie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question for the Stony Plain Library representative. There's 2 items of question. First of all, on page 28, under item 5A, there's a motion for an organizational review implementation working group, and it states it's comprised of chair, vice chair, treasurer, and council representative, but the way council is spelt is akin to legal counsel. I just want clarification whether that is legal counsel or whether that is the council representative as in Councillor Palechko, I believe, or Deputy Mayor Palechko, I believe it is. And then the second is just, I noticed in the past, the library used to have several standing committees listed at the end of their meeting minutes. Those have since disappeared, but I see on these minutes that we have 2 new committees being struck, and just wondering if we can get a little bit of an update on the process going on there.
Okay, thank you much. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Yeah, I can speak to both. As for item 5.2, that is a council representative. That would mean me. It's not for legal counsel. And this comes out of the review of the organizational that we just got. So, and as for committees, there's been very few committees put as of to date, but with the review of what needs to happen at the library, there will be more to come as we move through that organizational review. Yeah, that would be all that's coming.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor, can you just provide how many committees or what kind of committees are there for the Stony Plain Public Library?
There is none at this current time. The only one that we have that has come forward will be the committee that has been struck to review the organizational review, and out of that will come committees based on what has been put in the report. Everything was put on basically hold while the review was being done. Everything is still on hold until we allow the director to go through it first to come up with a plan so that we can start to tackle the issues that were ongoing at the library. And now we're starting to tackle them. So you will see some committees being struck as we go through it. And we can speak to them once we get those committees. But to date, it has been just kept pretty much in-house.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of that, through the previous minutes, those committees did a lot of organization planning and work for the Stony Plain Public Library. Are those just being taken over by the executive director in the meantime?
In the meantime, all the stuff at the library is being headed by the executive director through the chair.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to follow up on that, I'm just looking for some clarity. So in this set of minutes from March 20th, we have two, and I guess they're referred to as working groups that are struck, which I would interchange working groups and committees. So are these already disbanded? Were these like short-term working groups that have already completed their tasks? Or are these like standing groups that are currently undertaking work within the library?
Are you referring to the one that was the committee for new board members? And the one that is for the,
No, so the ones I originally referred to, so 5A2, the Organizational Review Implementation Working Group, and then there's one down the very bottom on the page 30, Directors Performance Working Group. So there's those two groups are mentioned in this set of minutes.
yeah, those are both new groups that are working through the new direction of the library. So there is a working group that is looking at the implementation of the review. And then the other group looked at the performance because our director is new. We reviewed her status as to whether it's full-time or not.
Okay, thank you. So that group has completed its work then, and
Yes, that group has completed its work.
okay, but the Organizational Review Group would continue on then?
The organizational group was just meeting for the first time tomorrow, Wednesday.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Members of council, any other questions for clarity and understanding? Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just looking at the minutes here for the library compared to some of the other minutes that we see, and the one thing that I noticed, and I don't know if this is an issue or not, but it doesn't identify who the chair is. It refers to the chair quite a bit. It's signed by the chair, but there's no mention of who the chair is, where typically we would see chair in brackets next to somebody's name, something like that. And so just looking for some clarity, who actually is the chair these days over there?
Go ahead.
So our chair currently is Brenda Spitzer, and based on the organizational review, which is what we're going through, we'll decide how we do the minutes going forward, but it was the recommendation of the consultant at the time to remove basically anybody's name from the list. So currently, the reason you see that there's not a lot of names beside things, and sometimes you'll see the odd name, is we're still working through the clarity of how that's going to work.
And a follow-up, if I may. Certainly appreciate that throughout the minutes themselves. I'm looking specifically at the top of page 28 under present. The chair, like the names are listed, but it doesn't identify who the chair is. So that's kind of specifically where I'd be looking. If we, look at our minutes or the Meridian Housing Foundation, it will mention who the chair is that is in attendance, similar to it mentions Councillor Harold Palechko. So if there's a question there, but just a comment, I guess, that it, speaks to the chair, but we're not familiar with who the chair is unless you were here to share that with us, so.
Yeah, again, there's a lot of changes that have come to the library through the recommendations of the report that was there. So you will see some of the changes coming forward that you may or may not be used to when you see minutes and that of different things. It's truly a unique experience moving on to a new board where there's total uncertainty as to how you run a board, and they're working through that so that we can get that done in a proper way so it states proper things along throughout all the minutes, and consistency where that has not happened in the past. So.
I just wanted to add to that because I understand what the Deputy Mayor is saying as the council appointee to the board as they're revisiting and looking at the org structure. However, these minutes are kind of our permanent records forever and ever. And I bring back to what Councillor Laurie mentioned earlier under item 5.2, where it says the motion for the Organization Review Implementation Working Group comprised of chair, vice chair, treasurer, and council representative. So if the council representative is council as yourself, that gets changed so we know who that is because it says Councilor Harold Pletchko. But going forward in another year or so, we won't know who the chair is or the vice chair or the treasurer because that's how they're listed there in the motion as the chair, vice chair, and treasurer. But there's no identifying in the actual minutes to say who is the chair, vice chair. So when somebody comes and asks you, like, well, who sat on that committee? So that's what I'm trying to understand. Like, if you reference on that chair, vice chair, and treasurer as part of the review committee, but you don't have them identified as who's present. So, how do you know who's who?
That's a great question, and again, one we're working through. We, at the committee level, know who is chair, vice chair, and that type of thing. So what I can do is, we were told specifically through the report, which I've provided to all of you guys, that recording certain things can be done in a multitude of ways, and it's however that board sets up the recording portion of it. Again, I'll reference back to when I got on the board, there was no consistency. They've kind of taken a bit of a step towards trying to do what the I can't think of what her name, the consultant was telling us to do. But as we work through that, this is going to change a bit. And I completely understand what you're saying. At the top of this page, we should actually have who the chair is, who the vice chair is, and that type of thing. So it'll be a recommendation that will come from here.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, appreciate that. Any more questions from members of council for clear understanding on the minutes? Okay. Okay, I have three. Just again back to the council appointee representative. Just I love seeing those minutes. I love seeing that the friends of the library were present to speak with the library board. I haven't seen that in the minutes for quite a few years now. So if you can provide a little update what's happening with the friends of the library, and definitely we do appreciate the partnership that the friends of the library does to make sure that they promote the Stony Plain Public Library and all the initiatives that are going on there.
Happy to speak to the Friends of the Library. Over a period of time, the Friends of the Library and the library had lost a little bit of touch as to what direction was the Friends of the Library. It has been brought to their attention and working through with Lena the philosophy of what the Friends of the Library should be doing. And what they presented to us that evening was what they had hoped they would be doing, and the funds that they could provide to the library for planning and different things like that. So having her there that evening gave us a good opening. It was a great dialogue between the two, and it's kind of been set up so that the Friends of the Library really will be doing the fundraising for the library. They're the organization that's able to apply for grants. They're the organization that's allowed to do a lot of different things that the board cannot do. So that it will be a working group that's outside. They're really just the Friends of the Library, but their funding will go towards the library programming and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you for the update. Definitely, we as a community appreciate the Friends of the Library. Okay, another question is to the member representative of the Tri-Leisure facility. I think I'm looking at the minutes for February 7th, and under page 16, so under the motion, I am trying to figure out who T. Haig is. Page 16.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. That would be a typo. That should be an R.
Okay, so we didn't add an extra person.
Nope.
Okay, and then on the next minutes, I know I'm not the council appointee to the TLC, so I'm just wondering when the bylaws were changed to have 2 vice chairs.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. That is another typo that you have caught.
Okay, so we don't have 2 vice chairs for the TLC?
We do not. Roxanne Kitts would not be the vice chair. She is the other public rep for the town of Stony Plain. So it looks like when they copied that down, they forgot to remove the vice chair portion.
Okay, thank you. I just had those on when I was reading it, just to make sure that maybe I forgot something, or I missed reading some kind of bylaw that changed.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I will send those back into the director.
Okay, thank you. Those are all the questions I had. Any other questions from members of council? Okay, seeing none, so Councillor Loynes has the motion to accept for information. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, move on to 8.1, which is our bylaws. And the first one is the Meridian Housing Foundation Spruce Grove Lodge borrowing bylaw. Go ahead.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. On April 8th, Council passed first reading of Bylaw 2688 DEB 24 to authorize the borrowing and lending for the purpose of the Stony Plains portion of the Meridian Housing Foundation Spruce Grove Lodge in the amount of $1,297,700. The bylaw has been advertised as per the Municipal Government Act requirements. Before Council this evening is recommendation of second and third reading of the bylaw. Once approved, the agreement will be finalized with Meridian Housing Foundations and funds accessed and released. I'll now take any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Members of council, any follow-up questions? This has been going on for quite some time now. Some questions of clarity and understanding. See none. Councillor Meyer, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council gives second reading to Bylaw 2688/DEB/24, a bylaw to finance the town of Stony Plains share of the Meridian Housing Foundation Spruce Grove Lodge.
Okay, thank you. Members of council, any debate on the second reading? See none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Okay, and that is carried. Moving on to 8.2, second motion, 8.1, sorry, the second motion. Councillor Anderson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move that Town Council give third reading to Bylaw 2688/DEB/24.
Okay, and this is the third reading. Any questions, comments, and debate on the motion? No. Okay, on behalf of council and our community, thank you, administration, for providing this forward. And thank you to Councillor Loynes as a member representative of the Meridian Housing Foundation. As we know, our community has been built by our seniors, and it's nice to be able to build, I think, one of the first lodges since Forest Ridge was probably, 1985, I believe it was when Forest Ridge was built. So it's nice to see this amenity coming forward. Okay. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor of third reading? And that is carried. Okay, move on to number 8.2. It's again the bylaw for, it's the 2024 property tax bylaw. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. The exercise of setting an annual property tax rate authorizes council to impose a tax mill rate in respect to collecting taxation revenue to cover the expenditures of the town set out in the approved corporate plan. This evening, we are asking council to consider all three readings of the taxation bylaw. Tax notices will be prepared and distributed following the approval of the bylaw. In November 2023, Council passed the 2024 corporate plan with a required 8.66% increase to the tax requisition amount, equating to $1,732,699. This means the additional revenue required based on the budget approved is 8.66. This is not directly correlated with a tax rate increase. Impacts on mill rates are explained in further slides. This year, there were no adjustments noted subsequent to the corporate planning process, therefore a spring budget was not required. This sets the original taxation requisition amount at $22,063,668 as presented and approved in November. 2024 taxation year is the fourth and final year in transitioning the tax rate split to the average of the 8 urban Edmonton Metropolitan Regional Board members, less Edmonton. This year, the average tax rate split was actually calculated at 1.43. Therefore, as per Revenue and Taxation Policy CFS 051, the maximum tax rate split has been applied at 1.4. This policy is up for cyclical review in 2025 and will be brought forth prior to the 2025 tax bylaw to council for review. Each property, whether residential or non-residential, are impacted differently by market inflation. On average, the town's total combined residential assessment base realized an inflation of 4.88%, which was reflected as fair market values. New assessment or growth equated to 1.67%. Individual assessment notices were distributed in February to all property owners showing the 2023 assessment value of their property that will be used for the 2024 taxation. Due to growth, the tax rate split changes, and increased requisition amount, residential properties will see a decrease in the mill rate compared to that was estimated at the corporate plan. Total impact to the residents is similar after laying on the inflation impact per household. For simplicity, a chart has been included that represents the mill rate change, which equates to approximately 1.7% mill rate increase versus estimated mill rate increase from the corporate plan, which was 6.5% increase. As noted, inflation must also be factored into the increase per household and is one of the factors impacting the mill rate. Reflected on the slide is a demonstration of a $350,000 house and what they would have paid in municipal tax requisition in 2023, and then applied an average inflation, which was the 4.88%, to demonstrate the value increased to $367,080. This shows the total tax and requisition amount for 2024 and the impact on that property. Non-residential assessment realized growth of 4.31% and inflation of 1.85%. Non-residential mill rate has been represented on the screen with a mill rate increase of 7.6%. An increase in the mill rate is due to increased tax requisition, tax split transfer from residential, offset by growth realized in the classification and inflation. Once again, individual property inflation has to be considered as well. The chart on the screen depicts the average inflation of 1.85%. However, non-residential properties are diverse in nature and therefore have a varying inflation rate. Also included in the tax bylaw is the requisition amount for the Alberta School Foundation and Meridian Housing Foundation. These requisition amounts are defined by those parties' annual budgets. The school requisition defines the split between residential and non-residential by the province and is allocated to each municipality using the equalized assessment. The Meridian Housing Foundation amount is distributed equally among assessment in both categories. They are collected by the town of Stony Plain and remitted accordingly. Alberta's school requisition was frozen at 2022 levels or rates, but the overall growth in the province assessment has increased the amount of the town's total payable due to equalized assessment. In turn, it has also increased the mill rate. Meridian Housing Foundation requisition operations has increased by 16.5% to total $236,515. In addition, the capital requisition for the Spruce Grove Lodge has been added to the requisition with a half-year debenture payment estimate of $56,021 and will continue for the duration of the 10-year debenture period. The chart on the screen summarizes the impact per $100,000 of assessment, broken out by each, the Municipal Tax, Rec Center, School Foundation, and Meridian Housing Foundations requisition. This chart can also be used to estimate total taxes and requisitions based on assessment notices. The pie chart on the screen denotes the allocation of a tax bill with the percentages broken out by Municipal, Rec Center, Meridian Foundation, and the School Foundation. The municipal amount equates to 71.8% with the Rec Center added up, so 69.8 plus the 2%. Administration recommends Council consider all 3 evenings of the bylaw as presented with the motions before you. Distribution of tax notices will commence after the bylaw is approved. This concludes my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very informative, and I definitely appreciated the charts and the graphs. Easier for us to visualize and to share with our residents. Members of council, any questions or comments regarding the presentation? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering if you could go back to, it's page 55 of 83 of ours. I just want to clarify something there. I think it's probably page 5 of the... It's a non-residential impact. Oh. Yeah, so just for clarity, in my package on the non-residential, I have a 1.88 and you have a 1.85. Our numbers are almost similar. I'm just wondering what the difference is between mine and your package.
Thank you, through your worship, to Deputy Mayor Polechko. Thank you for bringing that up. That was just a type error in the chart title, but the numbers didn't change. So we will be revising the package that's published after this meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. 2 slides further in your presentation, it's page 57 of our package. On the total impact per 100,000 on this chart, I noticed that within the chart for the residential and the non-residential, the numbers are different all the way up to the Meridian Housing Foundation. So for municipal operations, the Community Rec Center, and the School Foundation, the numbers are different. However, for the Meridian Housing Foundation operating and the Meridian Housing Foundation capital, the numbers are the same between residential and non-residential. Now, I did hear you speak a little bit about our policy in regards to the tax split. I'm just wondering if you can explain to us why the Meridian Housing Foundation numbers are the same and why the tax split wouldn't necessarily apply to those as it does to the others.
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Laurie and all of council. So as mentioned in the report, the School Foundation, the province actually denotes what has to be charged to residential versus non-residential, and then there's equalized assessment on that. As you mentioned as well, the municipal operations and the Community Rec Center are following our tax policy in our tax split. Currently, the Meridian Housing Foundation, both operating and capital, have just been equalized based on assessment. However, this is something that we can take into consideration as we update the policy in 2025.
Excellent, thank you. I think it would be worthwhile to consider that as we update the policy to ensure that those requisitions align with what we have for our other municipal items in there. I do have a second question, if I may, Your Worship.
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. You addressed in your presentation a little bit about the inflation. So on page 40, we had seen that residential inflation was at 4.88%, and then on page 41, we saw that non-residential inflation was at 1.85%. Understanding these numbers are not necessarily within the municipality's control, can you explain why we would see a little bit of a difference, or that level of difference between the residential and non-residential inflation, and why we wouldn't have a standard inflation number applied across the board?
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Laurie and all of council. So annually, our assessor sends out requests for information requests to approximately 20 to 25% of our population. That's resident and non-residents. So that information feeds into our data that would also consider some of that inflationary impact. However, in addition, non-residential assessment is based on sales, cost, and income. And so if there's any changes in those, on non-residential properties, there are less sales within the economy. And so on the other flip side, residential is based on mainly sales, and there has been an increase in sales, which means there's more data there to assess those properties at. That's the main driver of what a property is assessed at based on the sales within the area.
Go ahead. Thank you. And then just to follow up on that, it's interesting to know that indicator and that they are using the sales, but I think you kind of identified what might be a little bit of a challenge there. Without those sales, how do we ensure that we are achieving an adequate assessment of the true value of our non-residential properties to ensure that their portion as laid out in the assessment is equal and fair?
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Laurie. At this time, the rules our assessor follows are just the MGA, and so that is the main driver, and that is maybe an impact. If there, for example, were no sales, then there's really no data to change some of those. So the RF request for informations would drive some of that if there's improvements to some of those homes. But really, sales is the main driver on the residential.
Thank you. And are they able to take regional context into that, or is it strictly sales within the town of Stony Plain?
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Laurie and all of council. So the assessors are not allowed to go outside of our market. That's within the legislation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'm just wondering, I'm not sure who our council representative is on the Capital Region Assessment Committee. Again, we have a Capital Region Assessment Committee that manages, I believe it's either complaints or appeals. But I'm assuming then they have to consider data from only within the municipal boundaries of that appeal. They can't consider regional data?
That is correct. I think when I sat on the LARB board many, many years ago, I think it was almost 10 years ago, you had to, the applicant had to provide all the data within that community. So you couldn't take something outside of that because there's different factors in each community.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'm just wondering, again, does our membership in the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board and being held under legislation on them have any impacts on our assessment then?
Personally, I don't believe so. I think the assessment value is based on the market value of our community and based for what the amenities that we offer as a community versus what others do. And then it's just also then proximity to the largest center in the region, which is Edmonton. I think as from my own personal experience, the further you go away from the center of Edmonton, the more affordable the houses are. So I think we're a few points cheaper and more affordable than Spruce Grove. And if you go to Onaway, it's a few more points cheaper and more affordable. And I think that's just how it goes, is the approximate drive time, the amenities, and then, the availability for services.
Thank you, Your Worship. Appreciate that information. I just think it might be worthwhile to maybe take a look in the future at how we might be able to use those comparable municipalities if we are having challenges where we don't have a volume of sales in non-residential properties and therefore aren't able to achieve what we call reasonable assessment values, or we don't have enough data for assessment values of if there would be opportunities in similar locations to ours around the capital region that could assist with that. But that'd be future conversations as we look at policy. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of council? Councillor Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just referring to page 56. I just want to confirm, excuse me, something that was mentioned during the presentation and may lead to a question. Just looking at the new capital requisition for the Meridian Housing Foundation, 56,000. I believe in the presentation we heard 10 years. Is that correct?
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Anderson. The intent is to pull that debenture over 10 years, and that's what the factor of the calculation was. Just for clarity, 56,000 is only one out of two payments that occur, so it would just be a half-year debenture being where we are within the year.
Okay, and I think that will add up then, because when I look at close to $1.3 million debenture borrow to help with this project, you know, the math of 56,000 isn't adding up for me for that total value. So knowing this is the first half of the debenture makes a lot of sense. So thank you for the clarity.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Any other questions for clarity and understanding? Okay. Okay, seeing none, let's move on to 8.2. So Councillor Anderson for first reading, please.
I'll move that Town Council give first reading to bylaw 2692/tax/24, a bylaw to authorize the rates of taxation to be levied against property within the town of Stony Plain for the 2024 taxation year.
Okay. Thank you. Members of council, we have the presentation and any questions, comments, and debate on the motion. Okay. See none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. To second reading, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council gives second reading to bylaw 2692/TAX/24.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions, comments, and debate on second reading? See none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay. That is carried. And now we move on to a motion for unanimous consent. To those that are in the gallery and those that are watching through our live stream, if council is to deal with a bylaw in all three readings in one sitting, the unanimous consent has to be given. So that's the motion that is coming forward. Councillor Lowry, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll motion that Town Council give unanimous consent to consider third reading to bylaw 2692/tax/24.
Okay. Any comments, debate? Call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that is carried. Moving on to third reading, Councillor Loyens, please.
Town Council give third reading to bylaw 2692/TAX/24.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments on third reading? Councillor Lowry, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just general comment of appreciation to our administration. I know there tends to be a lot of confusion in the public when we go through a corporate plan and we talk about percentage increases and how it impacts various properties and what plays into it in regards to inflation versus actual increases and that. So the way that this was presented here this evening, I think this is probably the best I've seen the property tax bylaw be presented. I like the way that the charts have come in. I like the way that it breaks down the differences between the actual inflation and the actual increase in the mill rate, how we see the delineation of where the different values go in regards to the school tax, in regards to the Meridian Housing Foundation and what have you. So again, just a nod of appreciation to our administration for the great presentation of this evening. I think this definitely is something that's a little bit more layman's terms and a little bit more understandable for the general public, and will be a great tool for us to reference people to if they have any questions.
Thank you for those comments. Any other questions, comments, and debate on the motion? Nope. See, I just wanted to again just share, I guess, my pleasure and just thanks to our staff for putting this together. It is a hard document to come up with, especially when you look at all the work that's put into to get to the corporate plan, for council to debate it, to pass a proposed bylaw, which gives you certain numbers, and then coming back here to finalize the actual bylaw. So if I can just bring council back to page 44 of our agenda. When we talk about the services that we offer for the region, we are a number in terms of, that's page 44, sorry, page 43. In terms of residential taxes, we're on the low end of residential taxes for the services they offer. So the only municipalities that have lower residential property taxes than us are all the 4 counties and Fort Saskatchewan. Right? And we know Fort Saskatchewan can be lower because they have all of the industrial properties and businesses there. So for the offerings that we do for our community and our residents, and even the Tri-Region, council and administration has done a good job over the last 119 years, 109 years, that the town of Stony Plain has been in existence. So kudos to our admin staff and to the previous councils. And also on page 44, as you can see, the non-residential tax rate of the town of Stony Plain is on the bottom third. Right. Only lower by Leduc County and Parkland County. Right. So out of the municipalities in the capital region, we are very competitive. So I urge members of council, when we talk to our residents, take those charts with you when you go, right? And ask about the service levels that we provide, what they need in our community, and what we're actually taxing for that. Based on these charts, there is still room to grow, to provide more services, more amenities, if our residents want it. And that's a big thing, if. Right? We go back to the polls every 4 years to ask them, residents, what do you like about the town? Is it doing well? What do we need? So those are the conversations we should always have all the time when we run into our residents at the grocery stores, at events, on the street, just so that when we can come back to council doing our corporate planning, we can bring that to here and debate those levels. I'd also like to just bring council's attention, it was mentioned earlier by administration, but it was not highlighted. And I'd like to highlight that at this point in time. As the process came through during the initial corporate plan, administration was requesting a 6.23% tax increase. Okay? That's huge for all things that, that we as a council had provided guidance for in terms of the corporate plan, in terms of our municipal development plan. That was 6.3. Through the corporate plan process, actually council had added more services to that. We came to 9.76. But after when it came back to finalize the proposed plan, the motion was to drop it by 1%. That was removing the reserve. So the request at that time was 8.76% tax increase, which is a lot. We understand that. We understand that we're in a kind of financial hardship. Things are changing, and there are issues in terms of affordability. But we had a plan from the beginning to build our community, build the services for residents, to be able to provide those supports. Today, even though we're asking for the same amount of dollars that we requested in November of $1.7 million, the actual tax increase is only 1.7%. That's a reduction of 7.06%, an 80% drop from what the proposed tax rate would have been if everything stayed the same and council continued on building our community. That goes to show you that the foundations that we laid as council and administration are working. To be proactive and to keep taxes affordable in the town of Stony Plain, we need to grow. We need to build our community. And that's a perfect example of how what we've done has come back now to an 80% decrease in the proposed tax increase from November of 2023. So great work, administration, and great work, council. Okay. With my comments, that's final. That is it. So, Councilor Loyens, that was a long time. Do you want closing?
No, you use your words quite well. That's okay.
Okay, thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor of third reading? Okay. That is carried. Okay, moving on to 8.3. Administration, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. On April 22nd, Council approved the construction budget for the recreation facility in the amount of $41,500,000. Funding the project included debenture in the amount of $31,451,871. Based on the projected cash flow for the project, the first draw of the debenture is anticipated in 2025. Administration will continue to work to explore other funding opportunities to reduce the debenture requirement. Debenture bylaws must be approved by council prior to construction commencement, hence the bylaw before council tonight. When compared against the town's current debt limit based on the 2023 audited financial statements and taking into consideration all other debenture bylaws that have been presented to council to date in 2024, the bylaw is still within the municipal debt limit available as set out by the MGA, or the Municipal Government Act. However, the internal debt limit that is set by council as in the debt management policy would be exceeded if full draw occurred. Administration will bring a motion before council prior to drawing debt over the internal debt limit should that occur. Administration requests council consider first reading to bylaw 2693 DEB 24 this evening. Second and third reading will be brought forth on June 10th following debenture advertising.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. Members of council, this is a follow-up to a couple meetings ago where council unanimously approved the go-ahead for the recreational facility. Any questions or comments regarding the presentation from administration? Okay, Councilor Lowry, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to highlight some of the comments from administration because I think they are incredibly important. Just with some conversations I've been having with residents already in regards to the debt limit. As we've seen through the previous tax bylaw, there are many impacts to our revenues and to where we sit, and that is what our debt limit is actually drawn upon and how that's determined. And so while we have today's snapshot and today's picture of this, which does show that we would exceed our internal debt limit and we will start to edge close to the provincial limit, as we heard from administration, this essentially is the maximum borrow. Administration is going to continue to work diligently to achieve other methods of funding that will require us not to draw that full debenture. And during that time, we also will have potential for growth within our debt limit. And so at this time, we're not actually making that motion of exceeding that, even though we are approving the project. We may find that by the time the debenture draw comes, we may not actually even exceed those limits, or we may not be as close to those limits as today's snapshot currently looks. So just to highlight, I know that question's come up a couple of times in public and from members of the public to me in regards to the debenture since the approval that we made on the borrow. And again, I think debt limit is not a simple thing to understand. It's not always laid out in the best. So the way I like to think about it is when I talk to people is, when you get a mortgage, you're typically looking at the upper end of what you can afford. You have a debt limit. But the second you get that, the second you draw that, you start paying it down, you all of a sudden have a little bit more room. And because we're a growing municipality, not only are we in the position where as we pay down our debt, we gain more room, also as we grow and we increase our revenues, we also get more debt room as an increase based on that. And so I think it's incredibly important that that's understood and that we do recognize that this is a major investment in our community, but it's one our community has asked for, and I think it's one that has been very widely supported, and looking forward to seeing this project come to fruition.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Councillor Lori. Any other questions, comments? Okay, see none, go to Councillor Meyer with the motion.
The Town Council give first reading to bylaw 2693/DEB/24, a bylaw to authorize debenture borrowing in the amount of $31,451,871 for the recreation facility.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Meyer. Members of Council, any questions, comments, and debate on the motion? Okay. Seeing none, before I call the question, just one question for administration. So when this comes back further for Council's approval in terms of second reading and third reading, and will there be also motion to come back to rescind the $15 million that Council had already earmarked?
Thank you, through Your Worship, to you and all of Council. The original 15 million that was earmarked and that Council had made a motion a few years back has now been superseded by the new motion that was approved on April 22nd that outlined the new funding sources. So that motion accomplished two things. One is increase the amount of the project to the 41 million. And then second of all, it approved the funding sources for that project.
Okay, thank you. So just for clarity, we don't have to go back and rescind the motion that Council made a few years ago about spending $15 million on a recreational facility.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, there is no motion necessary for that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And I don't see more hands up, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Okay, and that is carried. Okay. All right, moving on to number 9, which is business items. 9.1 is the municipal historic resource policy. So we just saw this last week, and it's Q3 of 2023. So go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Council, fellow administration, and guests. At the May 6th Governance and Priorities meeting, Council accepted the draft Municipal Historic Resources Policy C-CD-058 for information. The draft policy aims to modernize and enhance the existing Municipal Historic Designation Policy 415/10/08/SP, which has been in place since 2008. Administration has not proposed any changes to the draft since its last presentation and now seeks Council approval for the updated Municipal Historic Resources Policy and the repeal of the previously titled Municipal Historic Designation Policy. I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for presentations and members of council. We just had a quick conversation last week and it's back before us. So any questions for clarity and understanding on the policy? Okay. Seeing none, then I'll go to Councillor Anderson for the motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move that Town Council approve Municipal Historic Resources Policy C-CD-058 and repeal Historic Designation Policy 415/10/08/SP.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Members of council, any questions, comments, and debate on the policies? See none, so thank you, administration, for bringing this forward and clearing that up. Again, as mentioned as before, this was an old policy that needed to be revised, and it's reviewed a couple times, and council has provided input, and thank you for administration for listening to us. And I think we're ready to call the motion. All in favor? Okay, and that is carried. Great, moving on with our agenda. 9.2 is the Stony Plain Public Library Board citizen at large appointments. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to all of council, before you this evening is 2 citizen-at-large board appointments to the Town of Stony Plain Public Library Board. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. And definitely it's outlined in the background. Administration, so appreciate that. Just one question. In terms of the terms there, one is a 2-year term, first term, and one's a 3-year term, first term. Can you explain the difference between the 2-year term, first term, and the 3-year term, first term?
The Libraries Act specifies that the library board can make their terms how they choose, and this was done strategically as currently there are a number of members expiring in 2026. So it was advised to make a term 2 years, just this first term, and if this person chooses to apply again, following terms would be for 3 years.
Okay, thank you. Council, any other questions for clarity understanding? Councillor Lowry, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. This may actually be a question for the Library Board representative. I noticed on page 28 and 29 in the minutes that there were actually some attendees at the board meeting. One was Al Pyrogue and one was Hina Noman. But I don't see a mention of the Jane McDermott. And so I see we have Jane and Hina being presented towards us. I'm just wondering if we can get a little background on that process of having the potential board members attending the meeting and as to whether Jane McDermott was present at a meeting that we just haven't seen the minutes for as of yet.
Okay. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I cannot speak to Jane because I do not believe she was at the meeting. Hina was. The policy really around that, or I guess the thought process that has been put into this currently is they interview them, they ask them to attend a meeting to see what's all about it, so they're there for basically just to observe. There's no questions allowed to be asked or anything, and at the end of it, then they've seen what is expected of them as a board member and how that board functions. And at that point in time, the selection crew goes back to them and has a bit more of a discussion with them to see if they're still interested. And if so, then as you can see, we have a couple of names in front of us today. It's not something that is compulsory to do. So as a new member, you don't have to absolutely do it, but it's highly recommended that that's something that we look at now.
Okay, anything else to add to that? Okay, any more questions and comments regarding the 2 appointees? Okay, see none, Deputy Mayor, I'll ask you to make the motion since they're appointing it to the Stony Plain Public Library, which you sit on.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council appoint to the Town of Stony Plain Library Board, 1, Jane McDermott, for a term starting immediately and ending December 31st, 2025, and 2, Hina Noman, for a term starting immediately and ending December 31st, 2026.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Members of Council, any questions, comments, and debate on the motion? See none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. All right, moving on with agenda number 10, which is council discussion. This is the time that council can bring up issues, concerns that are raised by community members, or just bringing council up to date on certain boards, commissions, and different events that someone has attended over the last couple weeks. Councillor Loynes, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wanted to mention the emergency preparedness that happened on Saturday. Even though it was super smoky, it was still very well attended. Talking to some of the people there presenting, they had over 300 people when I showed up by about 11 o'clock. So in the first hour, they had seen a huge, substantial amount of residents. The only concern that I did hear about it was maybe the lack of communication and advertisement for it. They said this year they didn't seem to find that we were advertising it as much as we had in previous years. And I was just wondering if maybe administration could comment on that.
I don't know, administration, does anybody can answer the, I guess, communications plan for that? Or can we get an email sent out to council later on?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Loynes, I do know that we have a communications plan that supports this event in particular, and we can certainly provide information with regards to the details of that. I know that we utilize our social media, our signboards, as well as some of the other outlets that are within our arsenal for communications, but happy to share that information after the fact with council.
Thank you. And then the only other thing I have to mention tonight, Your Worship, is I was approached by the owner of Jiffy Lube, and they are having a customer appreciation event on Friday from about noon to 5. They're going to have Elvis impersonators and a barbecue, and you have a chance to win said barbecue, as well as barbecue sauces and a few other items there. So that is on Friday, May 17th from 12 to 5 at Jiffy Lube. And that is all.
Okay. Thank you for bringing that forward. And please send us a calendar invite, and we'll all go together at the same time. Councillor Meyer, anything?
Nothing for me this evening.
Okay. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question and then a little bit of a comment after that. But just looking at our calendar, we're getting into that season where the community seems to come alive with our Midsummer Thursdays and our summer sessions and whatnot. Last year, administration arranged an opportunity for council to be involved at Midsummer Thursdays through a council tent and the opportunity to engage with the community and ask questions about, what they loved and what they would like to see in our community. And just wondering if administration has that in the plan as an opportunity for council to participate in that event and to engage with the community in that manner again this year.
Yep, good question. Definitely that's well worth the time that we spend.
Your Worship, through to through to Councillor Anderson and all of council, yes, I believe there is an intent to provide a space for council to participate specifically at the Midsummer Thursdays event for sure. I can't speak to the other events in particular, but certainly council's presence is welcome at all of our events, and we're happy to arrange a booth space for Midsummer Thursdays in particular.
Perfect. I appreciate that. I know so many good dialogues with residents happened last year, and actually visitors to the community as well that were here from out of town and just looking for what our community had to offer, and who knows, maybe some future Stony Plain residents there visiting us during that time. So sign me up. I would love to be a part of that opportunity again this year. With that being said, I do want to acknowledge the Canadian Forces. Councillor Loynes and I had the absolute honor of representing the town of Stony Plain at the Yellow Ribbon Gala this past weekend. The Yellow Ribbon Gala is put on by the Edmonton Garrison Military Family Resource Centre, and their mandate is to support military families as they navigate unique challenges of military life. They provide programs and services that help enhance strength and resilience in the families that they serve. We, as a part of that event, had the opportunity to witness some recognition for our local representatives for the MFRC in terms of the work that they did with the evacuations in Yellowknife last year due to the fires. And so we see the impact of the work that they do, not just in our own region, but throughout the country as well. I know that we have forces members in our community. We have reservists in our community, and these are programs that go a long way to providing care and support for those individuals. And so thank you to Councillor Loynes for joining me. Thank you to our Canadian Forces, their families, and the Military Family Resource Centre and all the work that they do to support our servicemen and women.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Lowry?
Thank you, Your Worship. A couple of things. I will echo the communication aspect. I had comments about both the treasure hunt with the large item drop-off and the emergency preparedness day, that residents felt that they weren't communicated very well. Yet there was a lot of communication around the walk to end violence that occurred in and around the same time. So I don't know if there's just something in the way that maybe social media works or what, and picking up algorithms and what it's showing to residents and what it's not, or whether there was strategic locations for the various signboards. But it was a note of feedback that I received as well. The only other thing that I'd like to bring forward this evening is I've been receiving an increase in emails and phone calls and conversations in regards to youth crime and particularly youth violence within the community. Had multiple instances reporting of the use of knives, bear spray. We had an incident at the Legion, I think it was last week, in regards to some wildlife. We've had a significant increase in graffiti and vandalism that's going on. I'm just wondering through administration if there's been any conversations either within our internal group with our enforcement team or with the RCMP into what we're starting to notice, any trends that have been documented or recorded, whether there's some known instances or issues that are occurring, or if it's something that we need to have some further conversation. I know we weren't able to speak with our inspector as he was unavailable for the last quarterly report, so I'm anxiously awaiting. I believe he's here on June 4th, tentatively at this point in time. Just wondering though at this time if there's any updates from administration on some of that instances.
Administration, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I can speak to a couple aspects of that. And I would first and foremost would say yes, I believe the inspector is scheduled for early June. And I would expect that he would be ready to speak to that directly from his perspective on what numbers he is seeing or not seeing. I think internally, yes, I know our CPOs are aware of or will track or they're in the community as much as the next person, and they will be made aware of some of the what incidents may occur. Couple standard things. I know Your Worship, through to all of council, it is certainly important that residents make these incidents known to the authorities. There's times where I think one thing that frankly, as a government, that we have to be aware of is that, we need to deal with facts and stats and realities and not necessarily, dialogues that may or may not, or allegations and so on and so forth. And that's tricky. That can be a tricky thing for us to discern. But I do think it's important for us to try to do just that. And having said that, that's the requirement or the reality that we would continue to ask, or I would advise council to ask residents to make sure those reports go in. They are tracked, they are logged in our CPOs, or they are logged over at the RCMP, and there is a fair amount of coordination or ability for our frankly, crime analysts over at the RCMP's shop to look for connection points in some of these concerns that are brought forward. So I'll just maybe summarize quickly. So yes, RCMP inspector, good opportunity for council to ask some questions publicly to see what those answers are. Yes, to internally working on and hearing from and trying to coordinate responses. And I think last thing I would say, typically incidents of vandalism and, do uptick as the weather changes or the weather gets a little bit warmer. There's more time and more people out, and we are aware of that. Hour shifts with CPOs and so on occur. So I'll stop there, Your Worship.
Councilor Story?
Excellent, thank you, and I appreciate that. I know I've been strongly encouraging the ones that I've been in contact with to make sure that they are sharing the information with our enforcement teams and with the RCMP. I know there's a prevalence of videos and pictures and things like that that are occurring, which I think is maybe one of the more surprising factors is the volume of this that's starting to occur in plain sight. Versus, we know the typical vandalism used to be stuff that happened in the dark of the night and when nobody was really around, but I'm seeing a significant uptick in stuff that's happening right in front of people's eyes. So I'll continue to encourage that reporting, and I look forward to the opportunity to speak with the inspector on that as well. Just one quick last thing, my apologies that I forgot as well. I've noticed in a couple of the subdivisions around town, we have a significant amount of marking spray paint and flags and what have you. Just curious, is that in relation to the TELUS fiber project, or is there another major infrastructure project going on I'm unaware of?
Through your worship to Councilor, I presume that you're referring to areas such as High Park and the North Industrial. Yeah, TELUS has been communicating with the town administration that they are looking at those areas. They're focusing in on their last communications that we had with the town, directly with TELUS, pardon me, was that they're focusing on the North Industrial, though they are making preparations to look into the High Park area and perhaps some other areas if they make good progress this year.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Story. Deputy Mayor.
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Thank you. And then just want to echo that the Emergency Preparedness Day was well received. Many residents were here. I think I came here in the morning and then later in the afternoon, and there were still quite a few people bustling and walking through. I just want to highlight one of the people that were setting up here in terms of the partnership for Call Before You Dig. There are so many times in our communities and surrounding areas where people have dug without calling before you dig, and they've hit power line or gas line. Call Before You Dig is a 100% free service that is funded by all the utility companies because they understand that it is safer to be proactive and fund a program like this than to have an emergent issue where somebody's hit line or somebody's gotten hurt because they've hit line. So again, you can go online or you just call them. Just got to give them like 5 days, seven days to make sure they can have time to come out and market. And it's 100% free service. So that's emergency preparedness. So definitely take the time, the opportunity. It is free, so that's not a barrier, but it's done for the safety of our residents and for the companies and the contractors that do all that work. The second thing is that on May 16th is the National Moosehide campaign. Again, we have little pamphlets out here on our town office, and again, it's just to signify to everyone that we recognize that there is a lot of violence against women and children, and as men and individuals with of authority, if we wear that, we kind of signify that we're aware of that, we're working towards of ending that. Just because we wear it doesn't end today. That means we're just working towards that. So at one point in time in the future, that violence to women and children will be stopped. Okay. Thank you. And then that's everything. So moving on to number 10 is a closed meeting. We do have nothing scheduled. So any members of council? Don't see any hands up. So moving on to number 12, which is adjournment. So with that, it is we are adjourned. I just want to make a shout out to Mr. Carl Hill. I understand it's his birthday, and that's why he's not here. But I just want to make sure that just to remind him, I was here on my birthday on a council meeting. So I just want to make sure where his dedication is to the community. We decorated his office. But just kidding. With that, we are adjourned. I wish him a happy birthday.